Thanks for listening to Star Lores. If you like the show, please consider subscribing and giving a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also help us make more great content by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com. We would also love to hear from you on social media. You can follow Star Lores on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Enjoy the show, and may the Force be with you.
You are listening to the Star Lores Podcast.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Galactic Epidemiology. The galaxy far, far away, with its diverse and interconnected ecosystems, teems with infectious diseases that travel between the stars. Microscopic hazards can be just as lethal as the macroscopic Wampa or Rancor. Because of the unique biology of the species that live amidst countless worlds, not all illnesses are transferable, nor do they have the same effect on all life. A pathogen like rhinovirus may cause only mild discomfort in one species, but could easily be lethal in another. Most dangerous of all are zoonotic diseases. These pathogens can jump from one species to another, acquiring additional mutations that make them ever more lethal as they go. Zoonotic infections can wreak havoc on planetary populations, and the danger is even greater on the galactic scale. First contact between species can be risky, as there is always the potential that one species may be a vector for a pathogen that is not harmful to the host organism, but can wipe out the species they are making first contact with. There are a host of ailments in common between the galaxy far, far away and the Milky Way galaxy, like arthritis, schizophrenia, and various cancers. But we will not be exploring them in depth here. Panaceas.
Everyone uses Bacta. We've been using it so long, it's replaced most conventional medicine. Uldir Loket. There are some substances that have an almost miraculous effect on the majority of all medical conditions. These panaceas are widely accessible throughout the galaxy. They are principally Kolto and Bacta. Although there are many other sophisticated medicines, the majority of medicine practiced throughout the galactic community's history has involved the use of one of these compounds. Force adepts can use their abilities to cure many ailments, but those sufficiently trained and committed to being healers are quite rare amongst the galaxy's trillions of sentients. The Selkath species, a kind of anthropoid fish capable of breathing air and water, developed the first of the galaxy's almost magical curative substances. They lived on the oceanic world of Manan, primarily in undersea cities, of a size and distribution not readily known, although the floating city Atto was built for the kolto industry and the air breathers who relied on it. The Selkath kept knowledge of the liquid panacea known as kolto a closely guarded secret when they realized how valuable it could be to the galaxy, and how much leverage it gave their formerly obscure world. They heavily exported kolto to the galaxy, and their economy was based almost entirely on it. Kolto's method of manufacture and harvesting is known by few outsiders, despite much corporate and state-level espionage conducted on Manan. Even its status as either a product of manufacture, agriculture, or a kind of non-renewable resource similar to fossil fuels is unknown. Although water pollutants are known to destroy kolto in the ocean. Kolto is harvested in or around undersea chasms, with the largest reserves found in the Hrakert Rift. Although the Old Republic did establish a deep-sea research center in the Rift, this was a covert operation, and its findings have not been made public. The Selkath researchers at the center, as well as some of the local fauna in the waters surrounding it, suffered from an acute psychotic episode in which they behaved with extreme violence. This episode was triggered by a telepathic or possibly subsonic signal from a larger organism. The otherwise pacifist and non-violent Selkath, in their rage, murdered all of the non-human workers in the facility. In addition to the crushing pressures, anybody attempting to harvest kolto in the Rift also must contend with Phyraxan sharks, vicious oceanic predators that likely share a relatively recent common ancestor with the Selkath. Both Phyraxan sharks and Selkath had violent behavior triggered by the same biosignal. The common ancestor of both the sharks and the Selkath was a gigantic Phyraxan known in Selkath mythology as the progenitor. Whether the progenitor's size is owed to close association with kolto reserves or to the force power emanating from ancient Rakatan technology found in the Hrakert Rift, or a combination of the two, is a matter of debate. Kolto is used to treat a huge variety of unrelated medical conditions. The most effective treatment is total submersion of a patient in a tank filled with the kolto. In a relatively short period of time, grievous injuries and terminal illnesses are miraculously cured, and the patient is restored to their pre-injury state. Kolto can be applied topically as a salve, and was frequently a part of Republic medpacks. It is possible that many infectious diseases in the galactic community are effectively treated with kolto. It would be expected that interstellar travel would facilitate a huge variety of novel viral and bacterial infections, prion diseases, and any other category of infectious disease. One would almost expect the urban centers of the galaxy to be correspondingly littered with plague-ridden corpses as a matter of course. Kolto, and likely Bacta as well, may be so effective at the treatment of communicable diseases that most of them hardly need to be documented in any detail, as a gulp of the horrid-tasting Bactade or a dip in kolto have replaced most other forms of medicine. Bacta is a form of biotechnology that consists of a supercolony of symbiotic bacterial species in a gelatinous suspension medium called ambori. Sometimes a fungal species called Zorzi is used as the suspension medium. Medically, Bacta and kolto are almost equivalent. The primary difference between them is the cost of production, Bacta being far less expensive than kolto. The manufacture of Bacta is much better described than the former panacea. A powerful monopoly on Bacta also emerged and caused the principal world of its production, Thyphera, to become a flashpoint in several galactic conflicts. The organic components of Bacta can be cultivated under laboratory conditions, and it is also secreted naturally by the insectoid Veratix species. These sentients reverse-engineered their own glandular secretions in order to mass-produce them, then eagerly established an intergalactic exporting business based on Bacta. Bacta's bacterial cells seek out damaged tissues when they contact a patient's body, and then promote rapid cell regeneration. This mechanism prevents the formation of scar tissue and can repair a patient at the cellular level. This ability is by no means limited to the epidermis, and Bacta heals damage to bones, internal organs, ligaments, and connective tissue as well. Getting at deeper tissue presumably requires full immersion in a Bacta tank for an uninterrupted period, long enough to require a respirator. After such a treatment, patients frequently report a sickly, sweet smell of pineapple in their mouth and nostrils for weeks following immersion. The mechanism by which Bacta deals with the incredible biodiversity of microorganisms, viruses, and other infections found in the galactic community is unknown. During and after the Jedi Civil War, demand for Kolto skyrocketed. At this point, Bacta's cheaper production and plentiful supply prompted its domination of the market for panaceas. A further blow to the Kolto market came when a scientific consensus was reached. Bacta was the more effective. The final nail in Kolto's coffin was its sharply declining production, the reason for which remains elusive. Minan's economy subsequently collapsed, and the ocean world would fade largely from the galactic community over the next several centuries. Kolto production in Minan re-emerged during the Galactic Empire's reign, as that organization's demand for medicine like Bacta quickly outstripped its supply. Neither Bacta nor Kolto are effective against every possible medical condition in the galaxy, however. Some unfortunate individuals may develop an allergy to Bacta as a result of blastocnecrosis. In addition to having a possibly terminal illness, patients are then unable to use the one medicine that could cure almost every other condition they may have. Patients begin to suffer from extreme fatigue and anorexia, in the medical rather than the psychological sense. Less serious allergies are common throughout the galaxy, and their prevalence indicates that neither Bacta nor Kolto are effective in treating them. Allergies could be unique to an individual or present across an entire species, such as the Minox allergy to helium. Allergy symptoms range from superficial discomfort to lethal autoimmune responses.
Bacterial and fungal infections.
Applicaria was a common illness that presented as a common head cold, but could progress to a raging fever and dehydration. The disease could be lethal if untreated. Airborne bacteria was the guilty microorganism here. Applicaria was eradicated about 100 years before the Second Galactic Civil War in 40 ABY, but in that conflict it was weaponized by Komnori species against Coruscant. When antibiotic supplies ran low, the disease was able to run rampant through the population, eventually becoming a pandemic. Ascomycetos pneumoconiosis, commonly known as Festerlung, was caused by mold spores. Symptoms included fevers that would eventually spike to a temperature that cooked patients in their own fluids. Death ultimately came by stroke, dehydration, and related conditions. Humid worlds with thick jungles were known to support natural reservoirs of the mold that causes Festerlung.
Venoms. Boratavi syndrome was a fatal disease caused by eating shellfish on Pamina Prime. Jedi Master Taria Damson was diagnosed with this disease after eating a local blue-shelled mollusk with a green stripe. The genus and species of this shellfish have not been recorded. Tourists should take note that other mollusks on Pamina Prime, such as those with a blue shell and a black stripe, are perfectly safe and delectable. Another ocean dweller, the selkath, can inject venom from their claws, which is known to be potentially lethal. The ecosystems of the galaxy are filled with venomous dogs, rats, mites, and cattails. Occult infections.
It doesn't take a Jedi Sentinel to determine where Bakuran fever bumps originated. On the planet Bakura. This disease leaves small welts on the skin. Little is known about the etiology of these bumps, perhaps owing to Bakura's far-flung location on the edge of wild space. The possibility of minor skin infections notwithstanding, Bakura is a fairly idyllic world. It is home to many seas, mountains, forests, a pleasant climate, and has a rich culture and economy, comparable in some respects to Alderaan. Balding sickness was restricted to the Draal, small, fur-covered anthropoid rodents from a planet of the same name in the Corellian system. Balding is the only real symptom, which was quite distressing to the highly intelligent and dignified Draal. The disease is bacter-resistant, but an herb called twin-scented natterbloom is reported to fight the condition via an unspecified mechanism and dose. The herb's aromatic properties are notable, as it gives off an unpleasant, pungent smell early in its growing season, which then changes to a sweet citric smell later in the life cycle. The Diric Gardening Club from the planet Telos help the Draal locate natterbloom and bring it back to their homeworld. In exchange, the Draal gifted the Gardening Club a recording of a particular tashar, a form of traditional Draal oral history, which documented their world's flowers, which was of great interest to the hobbyists. Any Draal looking to use twin-scented natterbloom medicinally ought to consult a physician first. Biebeck fever was a severe, though rarely fatal disease that infected a variety of species. Twi'leks experienced a more dangerous and disabling range of symptoms than most species. The fever caused bone ache, weakness, and eventually death if untreated. An herbal extract from gaddis root was known to cure the illness, though it did not grow natively on Ryloth and had to be imported to treat the planet's population of Twi'leks. The Galactic Empire distributed gaddis root extract for free on Ryloth as part of a scheme to identify false identities and to facilitate resettling schemes. Another disease unique to Twi'leks is cavern fever. It is only known to infect younglings from the Nightlands region of Ryloth. Cathington's disorder was a rare neurological disease that emerged at least a century before 3956 BBY, and was presumably eliminated from the galaxy with Terrace's orbital bombardment by Malak's Sith Empire. Mercy General Hospital on Terrace was renamed Dynamet General Hospital in 4050 BBY in honor of a massive donation from the Dynamet Corporation. Although this financial stimulus was initially used to research a cure for the Rakghoul plague, it had the knock-on effect of providing the resources necessary to develop the cure for Cathington's disorder. Given its rarity, and the prominence of the Rakghoul plague in Terrace's public consciousness, Cathington's disorder may not have been cured without the research interest in the Rakghoul plague. Dynamet General would eventually be considered Terrace's premier research hospital. Centuries later, the hospital would ironically be overrun by an outbreak of the raccoon plague. The raccoon plague is itself one of the most terrifying and biologically fascinating infectious diseases in the galaxy. It primarily infects non-force-sensitive anthropoids, although subtypes are known to infect other animals and even force sensitives. The plague's route of infection is variable. Patient 0 was infected by the latent Sith magic contained in the Myrrh Talisman, but after the disease's incubation period, those infected could spread it through bites or scratches with their claws. The incubation period varied between species and lasted somewhere from 6 to 48 hours. The infected then experienced an extremely painful transformation into a rack ghoul that started with hemorrhaging from the eyes, mouth, and skin. Next, a victim's skeleton and musculature rapidly reshaped, and the pigment drained from their skin. Regardless of species, individual rack ghouls look more or less the same, and themselves may be a distinct species. The muscles of the upper extremities are enlarged and elongated, facilitating quadrupedal locomotion, and their jaws are crowded with oversized fangs. Once transformed, rack ghouls are then possessed by an all-consuming desire to consume live flesh and hunt for sentience in packs rather than preying on one another. Presumably, the ghouls must often stop short of killing their victims, or else it could not be transmitted. Rack ghouls are often considered to be mindless, and this may be true in the sense that they lose their sentience and its associated personality and self-awareness. Large portion of the victim's original central nervous system must survive the transformation, however, as a Force adept wielding the Myrrh Talisman can control rack ghouls and prompt them to use their pre-existing skills or memories. During the Sith occupation, approximately 60 million Teresians were infected, primarily in the world's lawless and economically depressed Undercity. About 1 million Mandalorians were also infected on the world of Jebel. This outbreak was contained when Cassus Fett ordered that world's orbital bombardment. Several other outbreaks happened throughout the millennia, occurring on Tatooine, an unidentified desert moon, and aboard several different starships. These later outbreaks were for the most part contained, however, and it never reached a prevalence approaching the outbreak on Terrace. Republic scientists, possibly in conjunction with researchers from Dynamet General Hospital, were able to synthesize a serum that cured the rack ghoul plague during its incubation period. The Sith took control of Terrace before the serum was mass-produced, however, and jealously guarded the few thousand doses that had been created. Force healing techniques are an alternative to the serum cure. Imperial Bioweapons Project 171A was a disease similar to the rack ghoul plague, and was initially created at around the same time period, also through Sith magic. The late stages of the infection also caused violence and hunger for live, sentient flesh. Before this, those infected lost color in their skin, sweated profusely, hallucinated, and sometimes had violent impulses. Onset, duration, and intensity of symptoms varied with the huge range of sentience that it could infect. It was transmitted mostly through bites. The Empire developed an antiviral treatment for it, and aside from a few horrific outbreaks, has never been a long-term presence in the galaxy.
Environmental diseases. Bloodburn was a rare, chronic illness that affected starship pilots and spacers. Fevers caused by the condition can eventually kill sufferers. Bloodburn's etiology is unknown, but its prevalence is highest among young pilots. Exposure to cosmic radiation, or the radiation produced by starships, is likely a risk factor. Contracting bloodburn typically meant the end of any spacer's or pilot's career. Bloodburn had no cure. Though there were treatments to curb the most dramatic effects of the illness, Hadira serum injections alleviated some symptoms, but had serious side effects, such as fainting spells, so the drug was administered as infrequently as possible. Lifestyle coaching was used to treat the effects of bloodburn. Stress and dehydration were known to worsen symptoms, so stress management and hydration was encouraged to patients. A healthy diet and conservative exercise were also helpful to the management of the disease, and provided a patient was vigilant, they could have a normal lifespan. Brown lung was similar to lung cancer, and was found on the planet Adumar, on the coreward edge of wild space. The human settlers of this world were exiled from the Republic for their warlike ways in ancient times. A highly stratified, honor-based society developed on the world after being settled by the exiles. Adumar had a strong industrial base, consisting largely of munitions production. Their manufacturing centers were built primarily underground and employed the Adumari underclass as labor. These laborers were housed in apartment blocks built in Turami warrens above the factories, and it was possible that the disease is caused by pollutants produced by those factories, as it disproportionately affected the underclass more than the nobility. Kolu syndrome was a rare form of cancer known to occur only in the direct descendants of survivors of Terrace's orbital bombardment. Some combination of environmental pollutants and radioactive fallout are likely the causative agents. In her research on the syndrome, Dr. Kolu found data relating to its treatment in the remarkably still operating computer systems of Dynamet General Hospital, 3 centuries after its bombed-out shell had been abandoned. Zoonotic infections.
Do I want to know what Bothan netherrot is?
If you ever develop purple-green discoloration in the trouser area, tell me so I can leave the ship immediately.
The Hero of Tython and Doc. Bothan red rash is a dermatological disease that causes rashes to erupt all over the body. Although not easily spread through contact, it could jump from one species to another, infecting several anthropoid species. Beings in close, frequent contact with one another, such as members of the flight squadron, could transmit red rash between members. Brainworm rot type A was a fatal airborne disease that was a subtype of brain rot plague, which afflicted humanoids and cephalopods. High concentrations of a substance called dialogen in the bloodstream are known as risk factors. Pneumodians, anomids, and wall kabashites were all known vectors of the disease. In cetaceans, it caused isolated purpling of gills and blowholes, and universal symptoms included nausea and cold sweats. Neurological symptoms included various aphasias, impairments of the ability to process written instructions, and syntax errors in both spoken and written communication. Refugees brought the disease to Coruscant during the Separatist crisis. Untreated, it progressed from type A to type B. All letters of the brainworm rot alphabet are thought to originate on Pneumodia, which is well known for frequent pandemics and quarantines. As the name implies, Cantrosian scratch was transmitted via scratches from a Cantrosian's paw. It was supposed by some that annoying one of these anthropoid felines could result in a scratch from one of their claws extending from each digit. Bothan nether rot has been present in the galactic community since at least 3681 BBY. This communicable disease infects most humanoid species. Its primary symptom is a purple-green skin discoloration around the upper legs. The effects of the disease were considered by some doctors to be insignificant or purely cosmetic, and thus research for a cure has not been priority in the medical community. Despite this apparent insignificance, the disease carried with it certain social stigmas.
Viral infections. He's as good at destroying Wookiee culture as dropping corpses full of Androxian flu. Quote, Jolie Bindo on the subject of Chundar.
Balmora flu is similar to some rhinoviruses and causes intense nasal congestion, swelling, and pain. It is mildly contagious and originates on the core world of Balmora. It is known to have enclaves as far out as the Outer Rim, so it is possible that it represents a galactic pandemic. Cathor fever was believed to have originated on the planet of Ithor, likely from the crystalline forest region known as the Cathor Hills. It is unknown if the sentient Bafor trees that constitute the forest there are vectors of the disease, or if the fever attained its name for some other reason. Androxian flu could infect a variety of sentient anthropoid species, including humans and Wookiees. Its vector is thought to be cadavers infected with the flu, though little is known about it apart from scattered historical references. Bonadin cough came from the corporate sector planet of the same name. The characteristic hoarse cough that it causes is likely produced via constriction of the vocal cords. The second major symptom is extreme fatigue. Bonadin is a world with an ecosystem ravaged by millennia of heavy industry, though it is a vibrant commercial hub owing to numerous large spaceports, manufacturing, and resource extraction. Of particular note to the galactic epidemiologist are the huge variety of exotic animals imported there from all corners of the galaxy, making the likelihood that novel zoonotic infections could evolve and be quickly dispersed throughout the galaxy from Bonadin very high. Bonadin's heavily polluted atmosphere and associated attempts to remedial terraforming may also play a role in the disease's etiology. The Carduine chills caused congestion, coughing, fatigue, body aches, and an insatiable appetite. On Carduine, the virus seldom mutated to any significant degree, which meant that once infected, the person developed an immunity, and an effective vaccine was easy to synthesize and administer. A variation of the virus developed on the planet Helanet, but this type mutated at such a rate that developing a vaccine was almost impossible. The Bortle contagion was a virulent form of pneumococcal disease. In its late stages, patients effectively drowned from the fluid buildup in their lungs. The contagion eventually spread to the planet Risik and infected large swaths of the native Risicaral species. Although the Galactic Republic had developed an antidote, a vessel transporting the medicine was intercepted by Fujari pirates, who left it to spoil in the hold. The Republic did not further intervene in either stopping the pirates or further Republic health campaigns in the region, resulting in millions of Risicaral deaths. This event is considered by some to be a primary reason why Risik allied with the Trade Federation during the Separatist crisis. That organization would do something about the local brigands.
This is a public health advisory. If you have recently returned from intergalactic travel to the world of Bonadan in the corporate sector, and are experiencing symptoms of a hoarse cough or extreme fatigue, please self-isolate for a period of 2 weeks and avoid all unnecessary interstellar travel. Also, when out in public spaces, please stay at least 2 meters apart from all other anthropoid beings. If you witness any other fellow citizens violating this social distancing directive, please report them to the nearest Imperial Public Health Officer, who will not shoot them with their blaster.
Welcome aboard the Millennial Falcon.
Sorry, got a little bit of the Bonneton cough, fellas.
Hope you're wearing your spacer mask.
Yeah, I'm wearing my Imperial Stormtrooper mask there. So we're talking about galactic epidemiology.
What timing?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on in the world, why that would be on anybody's brain at this point in history. As we know, this is an evergreen show. We don't talk about Milky
Local
Way
events.
current events. Only the galaxy far, far away. So it's interesting that there are so many diseases in the Star Wars galaxy that can travel relatively easily between species, and it sort of indicates a pattern that I suspected in our xenobiology episode, that sort of most of the life in the galaxy is pretty much the same. None of it is that exotic. It's like not based on something other than DNA.
Yeah, that's likely true, because if you had like a silicone-based life form, they're probably like totally unaffected by viruses and things that would affect.
Although silicone-based life forms like the Minoc also have allergies. I can do this all day.
Stop it, Star Wars.
So Coruscant would be a public health nightmare, I think, considering how it's
Densely populated. It is.
yeah, it's Shanghai over the surface of the Earth, essentially. And not only is it just a lot of people, but they're different species from all over the galaxy, and there's a constant influx and outflux of other species and theoretically pathogens. So my sort of headcanon is that Bacta and Kolto basically take care of like 99% of any disease that anybody could possibly get. And sort of what's left over, what we've covered, is like just what Bacta essential and Kolto can't treat.
Yeah.
And that's only a few hundred diseases, where I don't know how many diseases
how
your
many
average doctor
millions.
has to treat,
Yeah.
but it's more than there are in Star Wars.
Imagine
I'm
medical
sure that,
school.
I'm
in
sure
Star
there's
Wars.
like a huge routine of immunizations that you have to take when you.
What I'm saying, though, is that you don't even need immunizations, because
Backed as a cure-all.
the second you get anything, you just take Bacta right away, and you don't even have to know what you have.
It's like
most of the time.
antibiotics. It's going to produce a super bug that will make.
But Bacta is it more just treats the symptoms, not necessarily prevents it, right?
What? No, it doesn't prevent it. But I'm saying if you get sick, it doesn't matter how severe the
Yeah.
thing is. The
Yeah.
second you
No,
get
I
a symptom,
know.
you just take the Bacta.
Yeah.
I just think medical school would be a nightmare. You'd have to would you specialize in certain species? Would you have to cover all diseases in the galaxy?
I think you would.
You'd have to. It'd be very specialized, like the medical profession in Star Wars, like unbelievably specialized.
Sort of. I think your average GP would be a specialist in Bacta, essentially.
He's just a Bacta dealer.
I mean, honestly,
He's supported by Big Bacta. That's what that is.
because there's only a few hundred possible medical conditions, because broken bones are cured with Bacta, burns
Right.
are cured with Bacta.
But you also have to know
Acne, I assume, would be cured by Bacta.
you have to know the biology of all the species you're dealing with. Although, granted, on the flip side, you also have like massive medical databases where you probably just punch in what species they have, what symptoms they're showing, and boom.
That's the other thing. These are cultures who've had like science and computers for tens of thousands of years.
And
right?
droids, like you see a lot of medical droids.
And
specifically.
droids.
So you don't even have to have a biological
That's
brain
true.
memorize stuff.
Yeah.
Your medical droid will take care of
Yeah,
everything.
precisely.
It is essentially a computer.
I do wonder if Bacta and Culto is a little bit lazy writing, just because it can
As a cure-all?
As a cure-all, yeah.
Yes and no, because I think the intellectual problem that we're coming up with, like, you'd have to, how insane would medical school be, right? It's if you actually think about a galactic community and all these germs, like how, and all these different species, how would you keep Coruscant from just being a necropolis that's just littered with dead bodies?
And every time a new species comes in, you just like wipe out the population.
That's my thing. Like that's
again and
I
again.
think that is exactly what would happen.
Yeah.
Given what we know about infectious diseases,
Now-
unless you had a cure-all like Bacta.
Flip side, cross-species transmission is relatively rare on our planet. And that's with, everyone originating with similar biology, right? It's only when it jumps.
It's not that rare, though.
But when it jumps is when it's devastating. But it's not like there are a lot of diseases that animals carry that humans
Right.
don't catch, right? And vice versa.
There's an anthropologist called Jared Diamond. He wrote Guns, Germs, and Steel and Collapse. And that's sort of his big theory, is has been traditionally at the heart of every great civilization that has risen and fallen. They fell because of zoonotic diseases, because of this exact of infections skipping from jumping from one species to another, right? So I think that would happen at a
and they do touch on that
scale.
in Star Wars too, especially when they have like new contact with species. They have probably, I assume, protocols for like introducing them to germs and things to avoid.
Just crop dust them with Bacta.
Yeah, I do wonder if there's any history we can find on like Wikipedia of, a species getting almost inadvertently, maybe a primitive species getting inadvertently wiped out by accidentally spreading a disease to them.
I'm sure it's happened.
Yeah.
Numerous occasions.
Yeah. And then, whoever gave them the disease sort of just left and didn't think about it.
Or took advantage of the situation.
Or
and
did
like,
that.
Oh, look, it's free real estate.
But anyways.
I found a nice, just perfect choice example of technobabble, and that's dialogen, which is the chemical that, what is it? I think it's brain rot plague or something. Let me do a quick...
Consult the medical droid.
I'll consult my medical droid. Beep, boop, beep, boop. Yeah, it was brain rot plague. So if you have high dialogen in your blood, then you get the brain rot plague. But there's no such thing as dialogen. That was purely an invention.
Or there's no such thing as dialogen yet.
I don't know if dialogen was supposed to be like an element or what. I haven't read the source text on it.
Genetic material.
But I just like...
Maybe it's an undiscovered thing. Oh, also, just quick note on the Bacta as a cure-all and lazy writing. We've, in real life, come across like lots of things that aren't necessarily cure-alls, but have like wiped out a lot of diseases that used to kill us.
Yeah,
right? Things like penicillin,
plumbing,
antibiotics.
Mostly. It's mostly indoor
washing
plumbing.
your hands have like reduced, significant amounts of germs and disease and stuff like that. So to have like something that cures like 99% of ailments is not necessarily unprecedented.
As they say on the Sawbones podcast, though, cure-alls cure nothing. There's no such thing as a cure-all. There's even penicillin. We won't get into it. But, so I found some pretty good evidence that the Empire did nothing wrong. I'll read the quote for you, Christian. The Empire even killed some Selkath to use in special gourmet meals targeted at hot palates.
It was probably pretty good sushi, though.
Yeah, it would have been.
I'm more a calamari guy.
Well, it would have been
a Mon calamari guy.
The Selkath, I imagine, would taste kind of like steak because they're like manta rays.
Yeah.
And manta rays are supposed to be
More steak-like.
and they're related to sharks, and sharks have big, meaty, protein-packed steaks.
Versus a Mon calamari.
Versus
who
the Mon
should
calamari.
actually not be Mon calamari because it should be the
Quarren
Quarren.
should be the Mon calamari.
I agree.
But they're called the Quarren because they're quarrelsome. They're the bad guys. They get into the fights with the Mon Cals.
Right. If you only read one side of history.
There's another funny pun I like, eerie coolie disorder. It refers to a pronounced sense of unease experienced by most humans and humanoids when they encounter a droid that appears almost, but not quite, human. In other words, the uncanny valley. There's a particular Star Wars version, the eerie coolie rather than the uncanny valley.
That's hilarious.
I thought that was funny. Somebody was having fun. And then we have space werewolves, aka rat ghouls, and also space zombies,
AKA rat ghouls.
No,
And vampires?
That's Imperial Bioweapons Project 171A. We will get to space vampires, but I'm saving that. You guys can all keep your ears peeled for when we cover space vampires and space mummies.
Are they defined though as diseases? Are there root causes in
The
disease?
vampires?
Yeah. Or is it something else?
It's something else. I don't want to tip my
Okay,
hand.
that's fine. That's
for
fine.
the
I just
episode.
wanted to, just as a little prelude.
The rat ghoul plague is kind of cool though, just because it is werewolf-ish like, but it kind of has its own twist on it too. And you can't really, unless you find the cure, you can't turn back once you turn
Once you got
into
it, you got it.
yeah.
And aesthetically, the rat ghouls, aside from being quadrupedal, aren't really very much like werewolves. They don't look like dogs.
Yeah.
You in fact lose
hairless.
all your hair,
Yeah.
which makes you creepy in a whole different way.
You ever seen a naked chimpanzee?
Not
or
good.
a naked bear?
I do wonder though, like a rat ghoul is so dramatically different than like a human who or whatever species
Yeah, exactly.
captures it. And it seems the transformation, at least in the video games, happens rather quickly, which seems a little improbable.
Yeah, I think it also did in the comic books, though.
You know what
It
else
was
is
a
improbable?
Similar.
Space magic. Here we are.
That's true.
I just don't believe.
The rat ghoul play.
But
It's
it
a
is
conspiracy by Big Bacta to make you.
No big Jedi. It's just a smear campaign against the Sith because they blame it on the Mer talisman.
yeah, but it is a cool.
They're unfairly
Cool
demonized. Yeah, I like the rat ghoul plague. And even the Imperial Bioweapons 171A, it's the Wikipedia entry on that. It's also called the Blackwing virus. Is very long and involved. And it's actually one of the better, just like as an article, it kind of works as a story and is like worth reading. It's very interesting. Darth Vader's, of course, involved in it. So I wonder.
It comes from the novel Death Troopers.
Yeah. Which, of course, are stormtroopers
Yeah.
who turn into zombies.
Which is confusing because also the canon Death Troopers are different than the Legends
That's
Death
true.
Trooper novel. Unrelated. Although a whole other thing that we could talk about at
But
this point.
anyway, considering this and the fact that Darth Vader did that orbital bombardment of the Shizor's hometown
Yeah.
because he was doing more bioweapons research there, is Darth Vader Space Mengele?
No, there are actually other doctors.
There's a Mandalorian one
Yeah.
as well who like tortured Jedis and stuff, right?
There are numerous actual like insane. The insane
Yeah,
doctor
yeah.
trope seems to rear
mad
its face
scientist.
multiple times. Which kind of brings me into bioweapons as a general theme in Star Wars. It comes up quite a bit, surprisingly. During the Clone Wars, there's at least 3 separate bioweapons projects that happen. There are so many diseases and things in Star Wars, so there's no way we could cover all of them in depth.
Was it the Republic or the Trade Federation?
It was the Trade Federation, the CIS.
Makes sense. It's
They're the bad
easy
guys.
to deploy bioweapons
Well,
when your armies
exactly
are robots,
They
right?
use it as a strategy, right? Because if your enemies are all biological and your allies are all robotic, it gives you an edge, obviously, to wipe out the population, the biological population. And then the Empire also has a big investment in bioweapons development and research. But yeah, there's a lot of like the mad scientists. There's Dr. Bindi, Dr. Jenna Zan Arbor as well. They're all like mad scientists who play
But
prominent roles.
is it really even that good of an ROI on bioweapons if Bacta is a cure-all? If you could just get Bacta.
Some of the... if you're a subject being held by a
Sure.
mad scientist, they're not... they're going to use Bacta. And if anything, it could prolong your torture. Because
If
doing, like,
they're
crazy
using it as a
experiments on you.
torture method,
Yeah,
for sure.
and some of these bioweapons are made to have no cure on purpose, right? That's why they're engineered.
Yeah.
So it's to subvert, instead of using a run-of-the-mill plague, let's engineer our own.
But are they resistant to Bacta? These?
It's. I think this is where you get into the lazy writing, where it's actually like the diseases that you don't just cure with Bacta. That's because you're being lazy, because every disease should be cured by Bacta. You just conveniently, it's never there in your novel
when you need it,
when you're writing it. But I don't know specifically.
Fair enough.
Bacta itself, interestingly, glandular secretions of giant insects, which is a fun bit of lore. Just think about that when you're drinking your Bactade.
or submerged in the bath.
You're in a giant bug sweat. Well, we're coming up on the corporate sector. Prepare for self-isolation
prepare
for
quarantine.
2 weeks.
Thanks, Sam, for inspecting our whole ship.
No worries. I've got some space sanitizer for everybody.
Yeah, it's called the vacuum of space.
That's right.
It kills all bacteria. We just jettison you out.
The airlock.
Correct.
Bacta not needed.
May the forks be with you.